Linux began in 1991 as a personal project by Finnish student Linus Torvalds to create a new free operating system kernel. The resulting Linux kernel has been marked by constant growth throughout its history. Since the initial release of its source code in 1991, it has grown from a small number of C files under a license prohibiting commercial distribution to the 4.15 version in 2018, with more than 23.3 million lines of source code, not counting comments, under the GNU General Public License VA2 with a syscall exception, meaning anything that uses the kernel via system calls are not subject to the GNU GPL. After ATT had dropped out of the Multics project, the Unix operating system was conceived and implemented by Ken Thompson and Dennis Ritchie, both of AT and T-Bell Laboratories, in 1969 and first released in 1970. Later, they rewrote it in a new programming language, C, to make it portable. The availability and portability of Unix caused it to be widely adopted, copied and modified by academic institutions and businesses. In 1977, the Berkeley Software Distribution, BSD, was developed by the Computer Systems Research Group, CSRG, from UC Berkeley, based on the 6th edition of Unix and Unix/32 v7th edition from AT&T. Since BSD contained Unix code that AT&T owned, AT&T filed a lawsuit, USLV BSDI, in the early 1990s against the University of California. This strongly limited the development and adoption of BSD. Onyx Systems began selling early microcomputer-based Unix workstations in 1980. Later, Sun Microsystems, founded as a spin-off of a student project at Stanford University, also began selling Unix-based desktop workstations in 1982. While Sun workstations did not utilize commodity PC hardware like Linux was later developed for, it represented the first successful commercial attempt at distributing a primarily single-user microcomputer that ran a Unix operating system. In 1983, Richard Stallman started the GNU project with the goal of creating a free Unix-like operating system. As part of this work, he wrote the GNU General Public License, GPL. By the early 1990s, there was almost enough available software to create a full operating system. However, the GNU kernel, called Herd, failed to attract enough development effort, leaving GNU incomplete. In 1985, Intel released the 80386, the first x86 microprocessor with a 32-bit instruction set and a memory management unit with paging. In 1986, Maurice J. Buck of AT and T-Bell Labs published the design of the Unix operating system. This definitive description principally covered the system via Release 2 kernel, with some new features from Release 3 and BSD. In 1987, Minix, a Unix-like system intended for academic use, was released by Andrew S. Tannenbaum to exemplify the principles conveyed in his textbook, Operating Systems, Design and Implementation. While source code for the system was available, modification and redistribution were restricted. In addition, Minix's 16-bit design was not well adapted to the 32-bit features of the increasingly cheap and popular Intel 386 architecture for personal computers. In the early 90s, a commercial Unix operating system for Intel 386 PCs was too expensive for private users. These factors and the lack of a widely adopted free kernel provided the impetus for Torvalds starting his project. He has stated that if either the GNU Herd or 386 BSD kernels had been available at the time, he likely would not have written his own. In 1991, while studying computer science at University of Helsinki, Linus Torvalds began a project that later became the Linux kernel. He wrote the program specifically for the hardware he was using and independent of an operating system because he wanted to use the functions of his new PC with an 80386 processor. Development was done on Minix using the GNU C compiler. On the 3rd of July, 1991, in an effort to implement Unix system calls in his project, Linus Torvalds attempted to obtain a digital copy of the POSIX standards documentation with a request to the comp.os.minix newsgroup. He was not successful in finding the POSIX documentation, so Torvalds initially resorted to determining system calls from Sun OS documentation owned by the university for use in operating its Sun microsystem server. He also learned some system calls from Tannenbaum's Minix text that was a part of the Unix course. As Torvalds wrote in his book Just for Fun, he eventually ended up writing an operating system kernel. On 25 August 1991, he, at age 21, announced this system in another posting to the comp.os.minix newsgroup. Hello everybody out there using Minix. I'm doing a free operating system, just a hobby, won't be big and professional like GNU, for 386/486 AT clones. This has been brewing since April and is starting to get ready. I'd like any feedback on things people dislike in Minix, as my OS resembles it somewhat, same physical layout of the file system due to practical reasons, among other things.